Okay, so now that we have that done, let's start working on maybe the lighting setup here before we start doing the materials. Alright, so we're going to need some kind of environment in here, and we need to decide on how we're going to run this before we get started. Okay, so what I mean by that is, are we going to have it upright or are we going to have it laying down? And originally I was going to do, the basic upright version. If you look at these reference pictures here, like this, the standard way of doing it. And that would be, a good way to render it, but it'd also be, fairly simple for us to get that kind of look. So I decided to go with more of this style. As you can see probably from the previous tutorial, that the phone will actually be laying down, okay? And I'll just let us do, a few more things with it rather than a really simple setup like this. Okay, we won't use any compositing on the render. We're gonna actually just go for a completely straight shot out of max. Okay, so we'll be going with the laying down version, but we need some kind of environment in here for it to sit on. So we're gonna build a very, very simple studio lighting rig around this. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do is create a backdrop, and let's go into the left view. And let's maybe actually do it in the top view. Just gonna jump in there, switch this back to top. Okay, and to this, let's grab a plane, and we'll just draw that out like so. And let's center it on X and Y by right-clicking the Move tool and right-clicking on the spinners. And we really don't need to have these segments in here right now, so let's just right-click the length and width spinners to take that down to 1. And we'll just convert this to a poly right now. Okay, and we also want to make sure that we have the phone moved up on top of this. I'm just going to hit G here for a second. Okay, so that's written on our grid lines, which we want to. So let's grab the phone, deselect the plane, and we'll just move this up. Okay, we'll zoom in here. Let me turn off those grids. Okay, we'll just set it right here for now. All right, so we'll reselect our plane there at the bottom. So let's go to vertex there, grab the back verts, and let's just lengthen that a little bit more. And then we'll go to edge. Okay, let's also grab the back edge here. And we'll just hold down shift and drag this on the X and Y up on an angle, and then once again up on the Y axis. All right. And let's put on turbo smooth here, wait 2 iterations, and ice line. Okay, and we obviously want to have the phone, laying flat on this plane. And right now you can see that's, kind of angled up, so the phone's going to be sitting right through it. So we need to add another edge in here to make the bottom flat. Okay, so let's drop back down to edit poly, back to edge, grab these 2 edges here, hit connect. Back to vertex, grab those verts there, both of them, and we'll just slide that a little bit closer to the back corner there, and we'll turn on our show and result button. Okay, now just let us flatten out that a little bit better. All right, so I'm just going to position these verts so we can kind of get a soft kind of corner curve here for the backdrop. Okay, like so. All right, that should be fine. And let's turn off vertex here. Let's go to scale it on the X a little bit to make it wider. And I'm not going to do, a top on it. A lot of studio rigs come up and over the top and then, kind of a front piece that deflects light into the scene. This will be a really simple one. We don't really need to have a really complex setup. We also don't want to block our HDRI that'll be in the environment by, having a plane over the top of it. Okay, so a really simple plane like that. All right, and the next thing we'll do is maybe just lay the phone down here. So let's go and select it. Okay, so just grab all the pieces of it, deselect the plane there. Let's go up to group, down to group, and we'll just call this iPhone 1, and okay. Let's go to rotate, turn on our angle snaps here, rotate it 90 degrees, so it's flat. Let's move it down, and we just want that to be sitting on the plane. Okay, so let's bring it right down there, like so. Okay. And we're also going to need a camera in here. Let me just change the color of this for a second. Make that black, and we'll just apply a blank shader to that. Okay, so we're going to need a camera in here, and we'll be using V-Ray for the render, so let's use a V-Ray camera. Let's just hit F10 here to open up the render settings. Okay, and we want to go down to the bottom here and make sure that we set our renderer to V-Ray. Okay, so V-Ray Advanced, and I'm using the newest build, 2.3. We're also going to be using V-Ray RT quite a bit here while we're blocking out the lighting in the scene as well as the materials. So we're going to set our active shade renderer here from the standard one to the V-Ray RT. Okay, so that way we can render with that when we're on active shade. But right now we'll stay in production. Let's close that up, go into the top view. We're gonna go over and grab a camera. Okay, so go into the cameras tab, pull this down to V-Ray, use the V-Ray physical cam, and we'll just draw that out in the center, like so, in the top view. And let's just move it over to the origin line here by right clicking on the move tool, and we'll just zero out X and Z there so it's level. And don't worry about the dolly settings or the Y-axis, we'll just move this manually in a minute. Okay, so that's our V-Ray camera. Let's kind of position the left view a bit here. Want to have the target just behind it, like so. And then we'll go into perspective view here, switch our perspective view to the V-Ray camera so we can see through it. And we'll back this off just a bit here for a second. Let's also maybe angle it up, and we want to turn off our snaps for that. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of position here. Okay, and you can pan it around with the middle mouse button. Alright, so we're going to leave it kind of straight on. Something like that. And let's grab the phone here, and we'll just give this a bit of a rotation here. Alright, maybe something like that. We're just going to leave it on angle so we can kind of see how the highlights are looking as well as the lighting while we block this out. Okay, so that'll pretty much be our camera angle for now. Let's maybe move it just a little bit to the left as well. Okay, let's hit F10, and let's just switch our output size here for our render to HD, and we'll do, say, 1280. Okay, and I'm going to go back to active shade here, and I'm going to set this one to HD size as well. And for the previews, we really don't need to have it at 1280. We can just do maybe like 480 for our testing. Okay, so the next thing we'll do is just add some lighting into the scene here. Alright, so I'm going to open this up, and we'll start letting this render. And as you can see, it looks absolutely terrible, but that's okay. We'll clean this up. Alright, so I'm just going to leave this window open here, rendering. And let me just actually open that up again for a second. Close that. I should mention that in the V-Ray RT settings here, I'm just rendering with my CPUs. You can do it with your GPU if you want, if you have a pretty powerful video card. And if it supports CUDA, you can also do that in the new version of V-Ray. I'm going to leave it on CPU, even though I do have a really powerful video card. I have a GTX 580, but for the tutorial, I'm going to leave it on CPU just because it's also pretty fast. And the speed of the V-Ray RT will be dependent on how fast your processors are. I have a fairly fast machine. I have an i7 2600K with 8 cores, and it's about 3.4 gigahertz. And it automatically has a turbo boost up to 4.3 gigahertz. So it's going to be, dependent on how your personal computer is. But for something this simple, it'll probably render, fairly quickly. It might have some noise in there, but it's a good thing to use just, so you can quickly see how your changes are affecting the render. Okay, so let's add in some lights now. Let's go back into the left view maybe, and I'm going to sort of leave this open here. And we'll use V-Ray lights for this scene as well, so let's go over to the lights tab and pull this down to V-Ray. Grab a V-Ray light here, and we're just going to draw this out in the left view. Okay, and as you can see, that's going to update immediately in our render here. And obviously the light's right at the center mark right now, that's why half of it's black and half of it's rendered. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go back to the move tool, and we're just going to push this over to the left side. Okay, we want to get it a little bit farther away. Let's move it in just a bit. Okay, something like that. And for the settings on the light, we'll probably need to tweak this out a little bit later on, but for right now, let's just maybe take up the multiplier to maybe like 40 to brighten it up a little bit. And we'll just pretty much leave everything at the defaults for now. Okay, so let's go to the top view here, and let's just mirror light. Okay, I'm going to mirror that over as a copy on the X. Hit OK to that, and we'll just bring that over to the right side of the model and position it about the same distance away. Okay, and for this guy, let's also leave the multiplier maybe at 40. We'll slightly change the color for now. Let's just make it maybe a slight blue color. And we don't need to go crazy on it. Let's bring that up a bit maybe. a little bit more blue. Okay, so a really light blue color there. Okay, and I think we'll just leave it like that for now. Okay, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit more on our shot here. And we'll just rotate that up a little bit more. Okay, and let's hit F10 here. We'll go back into our render settings. Let's switch back to production. And we're going to introduce some GI into the scene here. Okay, so under the V-Ray tab, we'll go down to V-Ray environment and check on the environment box. Okay, we're going to use an HDRI later on, but I'm just going to leave this at the defaults for now. Another thing I should mention is that I do have gamma correction on in Max here. So if you go up to the customize menu down to preferences into the gamma LUT tab, I do have this enabled. Okay, and I have a 2.2 gamma correction here, and also have it set to affect the color selectors as well as the material editors. Okay, so if your scene looks a lot darker than mine, this will definitely brighten it up if you put on gamma correction. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that. Let's close that. Another thing I want to do is make sure that we're using the frame buffer here to render. Okay, so we'll go into the V-Ray frame buffer tab, and we'll check the enable built-in frame buffer checkbox so we can render in that rather than in the default max one. Okay, and we won't worry too much about the settings right now. Leave these at defaults. Let's go into the indirect illumination tab. We'll turn on indirect illumination. I'm also going to turn on ambient occlusion, and we'll leave that at about 0.8 for now. Our primary bounces will be the irradiance map. Our secondary bounces will be the brute force for the engine. And we want to go into the irradiance map and change this from high down to very low. Okay, we want it to be somewhat quickly rendered. We don't want to have to wait, an hour for us to see a preview of it. And for each subdivisions here, let's take this down to the 20 for now. And we'll also check on show calculation phase here. Okay, so in render we can see it calculating our pre-pass GI. Alright, so I'm just going to render this out really quick. And let's cancel that for a second. I want to make sure that we change this to our camera view and lock it. And then we'll test render again. And I'm just going to quickly let this render out. And as you can see right now, it's extremely dark. One thing we do want to do is come down to the bottom here and make sure we turn on sRGB color space here so we can see our render proper and like we were seeing it in the RT. Okay, I'm also going to turn on the LUT tab there. Okay, so we're still looking pretty dark. We're going to need to lighten that up, and the way we're going to do that is through an HDRI. Okay, so I'm just going to close this tab. Let's go back into the material editor for a second. And we'll just reset our slots here. We still have those blueprints in there as well as some of the materials we've made, and we don't really need to have any of these anymore. So let's go up to utilities, down to reset material editor slots, and I'll just clear those all out for you. So we'll grab the first one here, and we're going to use an HDRI image. So let's load that up, and we want to go over to the Get Material button and find under Maps V-Ray HDRI. So double click that. It's going to load it up in here. Okay, and I'm just going to use one that I found online. I can't provide this with the tutorial just because I obviously don't own it, but if you go to Google and search for HDRI image, you should be able to find a lot of them for free. Okay, and you want to make sure that's either in .hdr extension or .exr. You don't want to use a JPEG, else it's really not going to do anything. Okay, so I'm just going to use this one here. So we're going to open this up, double click our slot here, and this one was taken from Aversis.com. I believe he has some free ones still available, and this one's probably still available over there if you check that out. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is want to change our mapping type from angular to spherical. So we have a spherical environment because this was taken on Murball. Okay, and we're pretty much going to leave everything here at the defaults for now. We'll tweak it out a little bit later on. So let's just close this. I'm going to close this. We're going to go back into our V-Ray tab here, and we're going to drag this over and drop it on the GI environment box as an instance. Okay, now the lighting in the scene will be controlled by the map rather than the color here and the multiplier here. Okay, and changing this multiplier now that we have a map in here won't affect the scene. If you want to brighten up the image, we can do that by changing the multiplier here in the material editor. And because it's an instance, anything we do in here is going to update in our render settings there. Okay, so let's just test it by rendering again. We'll see if it's brightened it up at all for us. Okay, and as you can see, it's a lot brighter already. We'll tweak it out a little bit later on and everything, but I think for the basic lighting, this will be good for now for us to start doing, some of the material work. Okay, so let's close that. We'll close the material editor. And we don't really need to do anything else in the V-Ray settings for now. We'll fine tune those a little bit as we go until we get the final settings that we're going to use. Okay, and I think the first thing we'll do is create the screen texture. Alright, so let's grab that. Let's just grab the phone there. We're going to go to group and open. Okay, and if we go to open, it's going to open the group, but it's not going to ungroup them. Okay, so we can still close it anytime we want, but we can select the objects in it if it's open. Okay, so we're going to open, we'll hit H, and we're going to type screen, find our screen object, double click it. Okay, and we still have the unwrap on there, so we're going to need to render out a UV template of this. So let's open the UV editor, go up to tools, render UV template. We're going to do a 2K for this. Okay, so 2048 on the width and height, and we'll uncheck show seam edges there and render UV template. Okay, and then we're just going to save this out. And I'm just going to make a new folder here called maybe maps. Okay, and we'll go in there and we'll switch this to JPEG. Let's call it screen and let's call it guide and save. Okay, so now we have that saved out. We'll close this, we'll close the unwrap window. Okay. And we can actually just collapse that down to add a poly now to get that off there. Okay, so now we're going to go over to Photoshop and we're going to open our image in our maps folder here. Okay, and let's go over to the layers and we're going to double click on it to unlock it. We'll create a new layer. We're going to drag that underneath the first layer. Going to make the background color black. Okay, so just fill that black. And let's just name this stuff. We're going to call the top one guide and this one background. So let's double click on those and name them. Okay, and we want to set our guide letter here, or layer here to screen. Okay, so we can see through everything but the white. And now we'll just open a texture. Okay, and you can easily get a screen texture online if you want. I actually took a couple on my phone here and I'm going to use them for the tutorial. Okay, so I'm going to open those up. And they're not perfectly straight. Let's just actually rotate this 90 degrees counterclockwise. And let's do this one as well. Okay, so we got to pick one of these, and that one's a little bit more bright, and this one's got a little more saturation. So I'm going to go with this one because we're going to be using a V-Ray light material to render, and if we have it this light, it's probably going to be completely blown out. Okay, so I'm going to close this one. And we're going to use this to make our texture here. Okay, you can see if I go to full size here that the camera actually picked up, a lot of the pixels on the screen here. But that's really not going to be noticeable on our render, so we're actually going to go with that. And like I mentioned, if you do want to find another one online that you feel is a better quality, you can definitely do that. But just for the sake of the tutorial, I'm going to use this one. Okay, so we're going to go over to the marquee there, and let's just actually zoom into full size for actual pixels. And we'll just cut the screen off here. Alright, and I tried to get this as close as I could, but it's still not perfectly straight. Okay, it's pretty close. So we're just going to go corner to corner there on the screen. Do Control C, go over to our other file here, and paste this on top of the background layer. Okay. Then we're going to hit Control T to go into free transform mode, and I'm going to hold down Shift and scale on the corner here to maintain the aspect. Okay, I'm just going to size this kind of to fit the screen. Okay, we'll move it up. And we'll just kind of get it at the top there. Let's zoom in on it. Okay, so we just want this to be tucked inside. We don't want it to be coming up short like this. We want to make sure it's covering those edges there on our guide. Okay, we'll just go over to the right side here, and you can hold down spacebar to pan around. Just going to shrink that up, make sure we get that battery icon in there. Okay, so just slightly bigger than what we need. And we'll move this up, make sure it's covering the top. Okay, and then we'll go down to the bottom. I think we might need to stretch it a little bit, and yeah, we do. So I'm just going to stretch it down just slightly here. Okay, and that's just a small change. I don't think you'll actually notice it on the icons. So we just want it to cover like that, and then we'll hit enter. And we'll view it at fit screen size here. Okay, so let's turn off our guide layer here. We don't want to have that wireframe on our texture. And we'll just save this out. So I'm going to go save as, Save it into our maps folder as screen diffuse. And we'll leave it as a PSD for now. Okay, so let's close this up, close our original, and go back into Max here. All right, and to get this on the screen, let's go into the material editor. Okay, we're just going to name some of this stuff here. I'm just going to name this HDRI, and we'll do it lights. Okay, later on we might use another one for reflections, but this is going to be our lighting image. Okay, so let's go over and grab the next slot here. Okay, and I'm also going to open up RT here for a second. So we'll switch back to active shade and open this back up. Okay, one thing we don't want to do is we don't want to put the screen image on using just a basic V-Ray material here. Okay, we don't want to load this up in here. Like this. If we do that, you can see that it's extremely dark on the screen, and that doesn't look like it's on at all. Okay, so what we want to actually do is get rid of this material here for a second. Just going to delete it in both the material editor and the scene, and we're going to replace it with a V-Ray light material. Okay, so double click that, and we'll just load up the same image here. Okay, and let's go back one. Okay, and you can see it still looks extremely dark here. Okay, and the reason for that is because the render isn't accounting for our camera, our V-Ray camera settings. Okay, so what we want to do is go over into our material here and check on the compensate camera exposure. Okay, you can see immediately that's a lot brighter. Okay, and the V-Ray light material will actually cast light as well, based on the colors of the image. That really won't apply for this one because it's facing up, but if you're doing fluorescent lights or something, this is the shader you want to use for that. Okay. And we can also control the intensity of that by just cranking up the multiplier here, so we can go up to like 5 to make it super bright. And obviously that's way too much, so we'll just take it down to maybe like 1.5 for now. And we'll tweak that later if we need to. Okay, and I don't think we really need to change anything else here. Okay, so that'll be our screen material for now. Okay, and the next thing we'll do is just start working on some of the shaders for the body.